Have you ever been tempted to publish your own book? I mean, really publish your own book by finding a printer, a third-party logistics company to help with distribution, rent some storage space in a warehouse, etc., etc. If that's ever been of interest, then this episode is for you. Welcome to Everything Cookbooks, the podcast for writers, readers, and cooks. I'm Kate Leahy, and today I'm here with Molly Stevens. Hey, Molly.
Hey, Kate.
Have you ever thought of going it alone, hiring an editor, designer, an indexer, a proofreader, find a printer, a warehouse, all that? Ever interested?
Oh.
It's a lot.
It's a lot. I mean, I think the short answer is no. Although I have talked for a while with a good friend about packaging, doing all those things for other authors. I think for me, separating the creative and the logistic and the project management, that appealed to me, but to actually be the creator and handle everything from contracting out editors, indexers, proofreaders, photographer, designer, making all those decisions, and then to say nothing of the distribution and getting books into stores, printing books, all of that.
Books, right.
I do think it's fascinating and really excited about today's conversation because we're going to talk to someone who's done all of that. But really, I can't see doing both. How about you, Kate?
That's a really good point. I think it would be easier to figure it out for somebody else where you have your logistics hat on or you have your business hat on. But to do both, it requires, wearing not only the creative hat and the business hat, but just multiple hats all the time. The logistics hat, that's
right.
The one. I think for me, I would not be able to sleep at night worrying about if these books were on a barge heading to the right warehouse. What if there's a strike? What if the warehouse burns down and I lose the inventory? What if there's so many what ifs, and one of the reasons I decided never to open my own restaurant was that I wasn't so good at thinking about all those what ifs, all those disasters that maybe I catastrophize too much to want to do it myself.
We often talk on this podcast about how if you're writing cookbooks, no matter how you're getting it published, you are a business person. You are in business for yourself to, make these books and make them sell. But this is just, publishing it. It just takes it to a whole nother level in terms of everything that you need to think about and the risk involved. I think anybody who's really into this topic needs to go and listen again to episode 47, where you and Kristen talked to Nick about self-publishing, because there's a lot of good information in there too. And how, what did he say, 99% of the people he talks to who, you could see almost getting through the whole process. But then when it comes to getting the books printed, getting them bound, packed in boxes, shipped, I mean, that just really is a bridge too far for a lot of people.
Right. The thing that does appeal to me is if you can find a way to do it, being able to take a bigger piece of the pie for yourself is very appealing. Yeah. When you look at those royalty statements and you're sort of like, oh my gosh, how many books do I have to sell to even just, break even? Yeah. When you look at that, you're thinking, well, maybe I didn't have all that upfront cost in a way, but I kind of do because I had, the opportunity cost of all that time spent. And now, maybe you are working pennies on the dollar sometimes.
Right. And the other thing I think that's becoming more and more of an issue for people is that the big publishers now, if your platform, if your social media following, if your numbers are not what they need, you're not going to get a contract either. So I think we've already in the past 10 years seen a lot of advancement in self-publishing and a lot more interesting things happening. So I think it's just something we're going to see more and more and talk more and more about.
Right. And that's why I'm really looking forward to digging into the subject today with our guest, Katie Parla. You may have seen her on television. I think she was on the Stanley Tucci Searching for Italy show that is very popular with all Italophiles out there. I mean, she wears a lot of hats. She's based in Rome. She's a food and beverage traveler, writer, author, tour guide, and now publisher. There's many co-written books that she's worked on, but Joy of Pizza, Pasta Queen, and Tasting Rome are some of them. And she's also written her own books, including Food of the Italian South, which came out with Clarkson Potter, and then the book we're going to be talking about today, which is Food of the Italian Islands. So it's a lot, but she's also a podcaster. She co-hosts a podcast about Italian food and drink culture, and we'll be talking to her about that at the end. So with no further ado, let's bring her on. Hey, Katie, welcome to Everything Cookbooks.
Ciao, Kate. How's it going?
It's going well. Like, I really am excited to talk to you about your journey into becoming your own publisher. And first, I just wanted to start with this little story. When I first saw the PDF for Food of the Italian Islands, your new book, I really just assumed it was a Clarkson Potter book. I knew there was a watermark there on the pages. And for listeners, a watermark is something that publishers will put on digital galleys that I received just to protect the work. And I didn't even really pay attention to it till I was like halfway through and went, oh my gosh, it says Parla Publishing. Like, what is Parla Publishing? And then I Googled it and I was looking for more information. And then I realized, oh my gosh, Katie started her own publishing company to publish this book. So I'm really just curious. We'll just start with this major question. Like, what made you decide to launch Parla Publishing? I mean, what was the decision like?
Well, first of all, thank you for the wonderful compliment on the appearance of the book. It does look like a Clarkson Potter book because I just hired my team from my previous title, Food of the Italian South, but gave them no limits so they could do whatever they want. That's why the book looks so wild. During the pandemic, I did my taxes for a bunch of years and looked at exactly how much money I had lost writing cookbooks for myself, how little I had earned writing cookbooks for others. And I wondered if there was a way that I could do it on my own. And so I just crunched some numbers, talked to an editor and a designer and photographer, just got some quotes and figured I could do this by myself. But I didn't know that I was going to be founding Parla Publishing until I started thinking about logistics. I thought this would just be like an indie title. I've got so much experience in the industry because Food of the Italian Islands is my 7th cookbook. And I've learned a lot along the way and had some challenges with design and promotion along the way. And I knew that I could do a better job. But you're not really like able to ship a container of books across the ocean and have them land in New York Harbor and get cleared for customs very easily if you're not a company. And so I was like, okay, well, I'll just make Parla Publishing LLC. And I want to help other people through this process too. I love talking to colleagues and giving them advice. I have a lot of friends who are writers and want to create their own cookbooks or other publications. And I have lots and lots of advice based on all the mistakes that I've made and all the things that I've learned. And so I thought, well, I can publish my own books. I made a spreadsheet. The math made a lot of sense to move ahead with Food of the Italian Islands and future projects on my own. And I want to, and I am currently helping others through the process of independent publishing.
Wow. Well, tell us about some of those mistakes that you say that you made along the way. Which ones were the ones that you thought, if I was doing this again, I would definitely not do it this way?
I think I put my trust too heavily in editors or in agents that ended up negatively affecting my finances. I've been brought on to co-author books and worked on them till the very end without getting paid, which is not cool. And because in that particular sense, I didn't have a contract with the publisher, I had a contract with the chef who had the contract with the publisher. When I was working for free and often canceling my own projects in order to get a book done, I had to chase a chef to Berlin to finish a book, and he ghosted there too. So it was like, not that cool.
No.
Right. We talk about opportunity cost, right?
Yeah. I was like, this is not a huge honor. Like, this doesn't feel good. And I need not just to be paid properly, but I need to have my time respected. And so I trusted people in the business. And at times I realized that I should have really followed my gut and demanded to be paid before moving any further. I mean, that's just one example.
Right.
Yeah. It's interesting. You talk about your decision, and so much to ask you right here, but like, it sounds like it's both very much financial, but also artistic creative control. It's those two things. Your decision to self-publish, or decision to self-publish is one thing. And then the decision to create a publishing company is a logistical thing. But I think a lot of times on this podcast, we talk about self-publishing. A lot of the questions we get from listeners about it, it's often people wanting to break in. They're having trouble. They're new, first time emerging voices. And they're having trouble landing an agent, landing a publisher. And so they consider self-publishing. But what I'm hearing you say, Katie, is that what made you able to do it and have the confidence to do it is your years of experience working on books.
Yes. I know how books get made. I know how to sell books. And I've always been a very aggressive book tourer. So I put my books out and then I go on nationwide tours. I work really hard to sell at events, which moves books. And when you sign a contract with a traditional publisher, you know every single book that you sell for them leads to around, in my case, $2.50 knocked off my advance. Well, I've sold 30,000 books of Food of the Italian South, still chipping away at that advance on royalties, but I'm still really deep in the red on the production, publicity, and marketing of that book. So I would say, like, at first, Parla Publishing's creation and just launching out on Food of the Italian Islands on my own was a financial decision purely because I didn't know that I had the ability to have any creative ideas about what the book should look like. I had never been given that opportunity. Not that I had really noticed either. I'll use Food of the Italian South as an example.
That was the one that came out right before this. It was your last traditional book. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. 2019, the last traditional book on my own. 2 others have come out between those, Pasta Queen and The Joy of Pizza. But, you know, it's cool. Like, you get accustomed to writing a Word document and going back and forth, and then you get the layouts, you edit those, but you're not in charge of what the book looks like. And you're so busy. I'm not a particularly visual person. I don't have a lot of confidence in my ability to like appreciate design. So I was perfectly happy to let a publisher figure that out. And I, on Italian South, worked with Ian Dingman. He designed the book. He created the cover. And so I was like, this is amazing. This looks beautiful. This is great. But on my own, I was able to let Ian run absolutely wild, not realizing that the layouts and the cover that I get when I'm working with traditional publishers are the conclusion of a lot of back and forth with a lot of options that I'm not privy to. And regardless of whether your contract stipulates that you have meaningful consultation on the cover, that hasn't really been the case for me. Any challenges that I've had about the cover, any suggestions that I made about covers in the past have been rejected. So it was cool to get 56 cover options from Ian.
56.
Cool, and also like incredibly overwhelming.
Wow.
And so I really trust my readers. And so I picked 6 that I thought were cool and let everyone vote on it. And the winning cover is Food of the Italian Islands cover.
To describe what the cover looks like, you have this beautiful blue glass plate. The colors are so vibrant, and it really does stand out. I think in a bookstore, it stands out online. And I noticed on your katieparla.com, you use that same sort of design aesthetic on your website. It's, you know, that if you find your website and you find the book, it's coming from the same person, which I think is very smart.
Yeah, the typography and the color palette are similar, and what is wild is that it's a Murano glass plate that has a pile of anchovy pasta. I always wanted to put like a salted anchovy on a book cover, and I finally got to do it. And then that glass plate is sitting on top of an Italy map, and you can kind of see it through the plate. And it's just like, it's so weird and wild, and it feels so playful. And then the spine has this 3-dimensional looking text. And so when it's sitting on a bookshelf, it really catches the eye, and I think kind of channels like the energy and spirit of island life. So I am just absolutely overjoyed with the collaboration with Ian Dingman, and have brought him on for a book that I'm creating for Angelini Osteria, which is this beloved institution in Los Angeles. And I hope that I get to work with him forever and ever.
That's cool. And the trim size, just to be clear, though, the trim size does match the last book you did, your last solo book. So they sit, we talk a lot about how a book spends its life spine out, right?
Right.
But so these books will sit side by side, and to someone not knowing, you know, the intricacies of how books get made, it's like, these are 2 books by Katie Parla. It doesn't really matter, you know, the provenance of them.
Exactly. Yeah. They look really similar, not just in trim size. The paper quality is a bit higher for Food of the Italian Islands. You know, whenever you go to like a printer and you give them an example of a book, they're like, we can't do this. This is shit. We can do better.
Really? Wow.
You give them an existing book.
Right.
Yes. Particularly in Italy, in printing in Italy, where there is not a huge admiration or affection for printing in China. They are very excited and ready to one-up whatever has been done before. And so my printer was like, we won't make Food of the Italian South 2 with like the paper and the cover. We're going to do better than this. And I was like, cool, how much is that going to cost?
Yeah.
So you decide to go it alone, decided to create a publishing company. Do you have to write a proposal for yourself? Or was it more of a business plan and a P&L? How does it start?
I have like a Google sheet with all the recipes and features ideas. I would say format-wise, The structure of the book is really similar to Food of the Italian South, about 85 recipes, 20 features, lots of front matter with geographical and historical information. Just the content's a lot more personal. The stories are a lot more personal. But I kind of started with that rubric and went through all of my like photos from the past 20 years, did a bunch of additional new travel, and just wrote about a 400 recipe list and whittled it down over time to what I thought was both a more manageable number, 85, one that would fit into a book that weighed less than a kilo, which is critical for shipping costs.
How did you learn that?
By sending out books. Like people used to order books from my website and I would send them out myself.
Got it.
And I did that for years. And a book, whether it's like in the US or in Italy, like the weight of the book can dramatically change the cost. So once you go over a certain amount, it starts to get really pricey. Like when I ship out books in Italy, a single book that's 960 grams, this is so boring, I'm so sorry.
No, this is
It's
fascinating. Trust us. Yeah.
We love this stuff.
$11 to send in the EU. As soon as it's 1,000 grams, it's 26 euros.
Wow.
Which is more than double. And so those types of things I learned through also pricing, shipping, not just the sort of like container ship situation, but I'm going to have to be shipping out boxes of books, cartons of books. What is the volume to weight ratio that is going to be ideal and not prohibitive? And so it was like simply just like having this kind of home-based like e-commerce for years that made me think of that. But yeah, I got really into logistics and shipping details.
You have to, because it's one thing to write a book. That's a huge undertaking, as you know. And then there's another to actually handle all the design, editing, layout, project management. And then printing, distribution, making sure all that's going well. These are very different hats. So to take all that on is a pretty big undertaking. I mean, so you do your sheet, you look at the prices, you look at how, and I know this from firsthand experience too, it is so hard to make money doing collaborations when you're sharing the pool, and when maybe that $2 that you're getting for each book that's sold is really $1 when you're sharing it. So I can understand doing the spreadsheet and thinking, I mean, I'm not making money doing this and it's so much work. How can I do it better? But it's another to then take the plunge and say, not only am I going to do it myself, I have the confidence that I will be able to carry it out. So tell us a little bit about just, did you already know that you had a publisher? Did you already know how books could be shipped on a barge to, say, New York? And did you already have something lined up with distribution when you decided to start Parla Publishing? Or you just knew you could figure it out?
I did not know anything. I was like, I'm really busy making this book. I'll figure it out.
Wow.
But I grew up in New Jersey. I land at Newark Airport. There's like a whole container port there. Like that's how stuff gets here. And so just as I was sort of wrapping up the editing, I started shopping around these transatlantic logistics companies and found Maersk. So for anyone who is Newark port adjacent, or really any port adjacent, this is the largest shipping company in the world, and found that, you know, I could rent a container from them and they could move everything in a way that was really traceable. I could watch the container ship move across the ocean, and it was going to cost, for a container full of nearly 15,000 books, it was going to cost $10,000, which was actually more than I had budgeted. My printer was like, usually your logistics costs are like 8% of the total cost of production. I was like, okay, cool. I just trusted that. I didn't actually inquire, is that for all products or just the ones that you are very familiar with? In the end, it was inaccurate, but I also had budgeted extra funds for things that I hadn't considered. I really tried to figure out everything that I could beforehand, but that's impossible until you do it.
So in your budgeting, while you were working on whittling down these 400 recipes and figuring out the scope of the book, you're also creating this budget based on what you know and what you don't.
Room for error.
Exactly. What I knew was definitely going to be an expense, and then guesstimating the other ones. I guesstimated how much marketing and publicity was going to be. You don't really know until you hire a publicist or start a marketing plan. I guesstimated how much it was going to be to do like pick and pack at the warehouse where they ship my stuff out based on sort of crowdsourcing different quotes. I knew that there were certain fixed costs that weren't going to change, like design, photography, my development editor, my copy editor, the indexer, the proofreader. But then there were going to be these sort of like wild card things that I would have to budget for. But I also knew, based on years of selling books through events and through pre-order campaigns, that I could sell a lot of books before the book came out. And because you don't pay your logistics costs right away. You don't pay your printing costs up front. You pay it out over the course of 6 months. I knew that I could raise capital through pre-sales, and then through the first month that the book was out, through a very enthusiastic book tour, and really move a lot of copies. When you lay out all of the expenses, at least in this particular case, I calculated that I only had to sell about 5,500 copies in a hybrid of full cover cost on my website and then a 40% or so wholesale discount to bookstores. And then I would break even and then start profiting. I chose a 15,000 book print run because I looked at my sales from other books and I was like, if I'm selling 30,000 books in 3 years, I can probably sell 15,000 books myself in 3 years. But guys, I'm already in second print. So I'm very, very overwhelmed and enthusiastic that I was wrong about this particular guesstimate because the book has done a lot better than I thought.
Oh, that's amazing.
And so I think because the story of independent publishing, because Italy is a very popular subject, because I've established myself as a known brand as an Italian expert, because people are hungry for Sicilian recipes and curious about Sardinia, the book is done better than expected. And so now I can go and print another run and experiment with other methods of distribution. Now I want to get the book on Ingram.
I was going to ask.
Yeah, Ingram's a whole thing. Very large distribution company. And that's where a lot of bookstores, Barnes & Noble, lots of libraries, all sorts of special markets acquire books. And the math to stock my books on Ingram didn't work with the first print run. And so now I have more flexibility to endeavor into the Ingram world.
So without Ingram, how are you fulfilling orders?
So I've got a third-party logistics company based in New York, and they handle all the sales through my website. shop.katieparla.com has signed copies of my book. I stood in a warehouse and signed 3,000 pages that were later bound into the book, knowing that people, and I love giving people signed copies of books. I think it's like so special. I collect signed copies. And so those are the ones that are available for full cover price on my website. And then they also handle fulfillment to Amazon. They ship out cases to Amazon. And then I've worked with a lot of independent bookshops and lifestyle stores who place orders through the same site, but at a wholesale discount. Everything gets shipped out in like overboxed packages to protect the books from any damage. It's been going great so far. Also, a lot of like companies like Gustiamo, De Bruno Brothers are collaborators on gift boxes. And so when they have special gift packages to put together for the holidays, they acquire books, include them in the package, and that's all shipping out from New York too.
When you say pre-orders, are you talking mostly individual sales through your website or
Yes.
even through or whatever?
Not through Amazon, because as a brand new company, I'm a seller on Amazon, which is a different category than companies that are permitted to do, like a merchant account is allowed to do pre-orders. And so that's the next hurdle, to be able to be in the merchant category. And because the sales for Amazon have been very strong, there's a strong argument to be made in going to become a merchant. But I just have to figure out exactly who to talk to about that, because you're supposed to just get invited. Like nobody knows exactly how it works, but I'm going to find out.
Secret handshake, you have to know the right word. Does the word avocado mean anything to you? And that opens the door.
Password Bezos.
Yeah. Oh God, probably, or spaceship, So that, it sounds to me that that's incredible, by the way, of all the books you've been able to sell on your own. So congratulations. It's really inspiring. And one of the things I'm hearing is that the crucial part was really getting yourself out there, doing all these events with your other books. You have all these relationships now with restaurants, with bookstores, with influencers and companies in the Italian space. And that's really kind of paved the way for that strong sort of, you knew that you'd be able to sell, like you said, like at least these 5,000 plus books. I mean, without that, this would be a lot harder if you were coming out and just saying, hey, I've created this beautiful book. Now what? It sounds like you had to kind of lay that foundation.
For sure.
And have that trust, I think, in readers, knowing that they were going to get a quality product that was well researched. But I thought we'd now pivot just to talk a little bit about the creation of the book. Like you said, it's a similar format as Food of the Italian South. But what was the time frame like writing it? Because I'm thinking, you're doing tours, you're appearing on great television shows, you are figuring out logistics on how to get books across the Atlantic Ocean. When did the writing come in? How hard was that to kind of find the time?
Well, Italy was closed to tourists from March 2020 until July 2021. So I I had like quite a bit of free time.
Oh, right. Since your
good
business
point.
is pretty much shut down then.
Right.
So yeah, I had a lot of time to work on the book with no tours to get in the way. I was doing a lot of Zoom classes and things. And the way that I raised, the way that I supported myself and survived was doing virtual classes for corporate groups and individuals on Zoom during the pandemic. So when it comes to like the actual writing of the book, I don't know how it happens. This is how it goes. I do a lot of research. I sit down and have like a weird fugue state or like manic episode or something. And then there's a book at the end. And I don't know exactly how unhealthy that is or if it's okay. And writers will never tell you that's like a toxic way to work. But yeah, it just all happens. But I think because it had been essentially a 5-year process of thinking about the book, writing, I write all the recipes before I develop them too. So that makes things, I think, actually move a lot faster. And so I'll sit down and I'll write all the recipes and then I'll do all the head notes. And then I'll take a look and be like, I need to write about Sardinian knives now in the meat chapter. It's got to be in there. The vegetable chapter needs the Fiat Panda 4x4 feature. Like, we got to do this. And then it just all happens.
You love everything cookbooks, right? And we love making it for you. Here's your chance to help us keep it going. Go to everythingcookbooks.com/support. There you'll find links to all our new great merch, including t-shirts, sweatshirts, even a hat, and our bookstore where we earn commission on every book you buy. You can also leave us a review wherever you listen to the show. Again, that's everythingcookbooks.com/support to find all the ways to show us the love. And thanks for listening.
If you write a recipe before you develop it, you mean you've been to someplace, you've eaten something that's wonderful. You may have gone into, to my sense is it's a mix of recipes that are coming from restaurant chefs and home cooks as well.
And flavor memories and things like that. Yeah.
Right. You'll write a recipe based on something you've eaten somewhere and then go in your own.
Exactly. So even though the islands are very diverse and there are lots of different cuisines within the islands, I don't even know if you want to call it technique, like the process of creating Italian recipes, like we're not in France, right? So if there's oil and garlic and chili and something, it's all going in the same order. And then the way that you treat like botarga or the way that you cook fish or the way that, we do a lot of braising of meats. And so that process is all the same. And so the procedure, like I know the amounts I guesstimate, and then I fine tune them through testing in the kitchen. Then I send everything off to a tester in the US called Tatiana Pereira, who is a total G and makes everything really, really work.
Right. And that's smart, too, to cross-test because you know that it's going to be a little bit different in the U.S. on what ingredients are available and what things are going to taste like.
Of course.
Yeah. So that's actually a smart way to work then, because then you sort of can batch recipes and then you don't have that, oh, my gosh, like I've written everything, but like this chapter doesn't have any recipes and you're down at the wire. That is the worst situation to be at. And probably when you're co-authoring, sometimes that happens because you're waiting on, somebody to deliver the goods, right?
Absolutely. Sounds very familiar.
Yeah. Yeah.
So the same is true for all the historic and cultural information that's in there. That's decades of experience traveling and researching. I mean, there's a lot of that in this book. There's a lot of history. There's a lot of cultural information. There's geographical information. I mean, it's a lot more than just here's a bunch of delicious recipes from the islands.
Yeah. Pasta, pizza, bread. Like, bye. Yeah. I mean, it's a lot. I read a lot and I spend a lot of time doing research while I'm traveling. And so I'll just sit and like even do like a stream of conscious essay on something and then fix it up a little bit and then fact check in the very last stage. Before I sent the manuscript off to Emily Timberlake, who was the development editor, I just made sure that it was really clean and all those kind of like rambling essays that I'd just written really like off the cuff made sense and had structure and that she wouldn't be like, why are you sending me something in such bad shape?
Well, how was that working with?
Amazing. It was a dream. I had always wanted to work with Emily. And so I reached out to her and asked if she would consider being the development editor on the book. And she accepted and then did a spectacular job at transforming my manuscript into something that was, I think, really, really solid and good.
That's really an interesting way of working because I think sometimes we get caught up in perfectionism and that can really slow us down when we're writing. And by just, as you said, going into your fugue state writing as much as you can when you can, and then, taking a step back, looking at it later, then tidying it up, then like kind of putting it into the shape, then figuring out where the loose ends are. And then working with somebody like Emily Timberlake on a developmental edit, then you can really feel like this is a coherent story that's making sense to a broader audience. I mean, what was it like to work with Emily? Did she give you deadlines? Did you both kind of mutually because I'm thinking, in the past, if she's working at the publishing house, she's sort of giving the deadlines. She's kind of saying, okay, this is when we need to go to copy edit. But this situation, it's a little bit different. So in a way, if she wanted to push you in a different direction that you didn't want to go, you have the right to say, hey, that's not what the story is about because I'm hiring you. So tell us a little bit about that dynamic.
So actually, my relationships with editors during the editing process has always been very supportive. With the exception of always being told, like, you can't have 8 tripe recipes in this book. We're trying to sell this in America. The stories that I've tried to tell have been not rejected, but improved through the developmental editing process. With Emily, it was the same. I was really unfamiliar with and uncomfortable writing from a personal point of view because I always really wrote my books as though I'm reporting on something. Now, like, my job is to get into the voice of like a bro chef from Los Angeles. Like, that's my job. And having my own voice and telling my own stories was not a place that I felt super comfortable, but I really wanted to do it. Like, this is my book. I can write whatever I want, and I want to practice that style. And so she was really good at kind of like teasing out more personal elements. And in terms of the editorial calendar, this one was really strict, right? Because she's like, at the end of this calendar, I'm doing childbirth. And so I'll be unavailable from this day forward. So I have a tremendous amount of anxiety around deadlines for like listicles and 500-word articles. But when it comes to a 60,000-word manuscript, like, I'm a machine. It's kind of crazy. And so hit all those deadlines. And as soon as Emily was done with it, it went off to Ivy McFadden, my beloved copy editor. Then it went on to proofreading and then ultimately indexing. And then in the meantime, in parallel, Ian Dingman was preparing layouts, and we were going back and forth on different design elements until the final layouts were complete. And then that all gets, the whole fine-tuned and coded Word document goes into InDesign, and the laid out sheets are then edited by hand. Like, the one thing I've not mastered is doing notes on PDFs on the computer. So I print everything out and write by hand and then scan back so that the designer can make those updates before the book goes to print.
So how many passes did you see?
5 passes.
Yeah.
5 passes.
That's amazing.
Gosh,
That's amazing.
wow, amazing.
Yeah. I'm rare in that I've seen more passes than a lot of authors, but sometimes you don't see past the second pass.
Correct. Yeah.
If you're with a traditional publisher.
That's correct.
Yeah. And Katie, when did Ed Anderson join the project?
Ed, we had to postpone for a year because we were like, for sure we'll be able to shoot in June 2021. But like, even fishermen were wearing masks on boats.
Oh.
And so we had planned to shoot in 2021, but ended up shooting in 2022.
Got it. So that's why in your book, it doesn't feel like a COVID world.
That's right. There's like one lady holding like a bottle of booze and she's got a mask chin strap. But aside from that, and I'm fine with that. That's right. What Palermo was like in June 2022.
Well,
that's exactly the vibe.
Chances are it's going to be like that on and off for a while.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Right.
So everything was written. All the recipes were written. Everything was pretty much done before Ed came on board. So this wasn't a case where you're doing last minute research on certain areas, bringing Ed along. This was like specific to the photography when you were traveling with him.
Yes. And my goal was to shoot all the food in situ. So I didn't have to have every single bit of every recipe completely fine-tuned by the time we went out to shoot, but I had a shot list. And there were only 4 recipes that were shot in studio in California when Ed went back home. Just because there was a flight cancellation, we couldn't get to Pantelleria. And so the Pantelleria dishes had to be shot externally. But yeah, it was, wouldn't recommend shooting dozens of islands in 10 days, but
10 days? Wow.
that was the time constraint and the budget, and we made it happen. And I think Ed never makes anything look like it's a rush job. He works extremely fast. He catches beautiful interpersonal moments. He catches just the most surprising things. And what I love about him is he is so adept at shooting people, food, market spaces, architecture, ambiance. Like he's great at all of those things equally. So I love working with him, and I'm very sad that the Angelini Ostria cookbook is being shot in a few days, and I'm going to be in Rome getting the dailies while they're shooting at the restaurant with
So
Ed.
Ed is there. Ed's going to be shooting that book in Los Angeles. That's neat. It's great when you find that match of the book and the story, and then you find the right photographer who can understand that vision and really flesh it out and bring those stories to life in photography. And I do agree, like when you find somebody that you love working with, as also just like Ed, you can sort of put him in any city and he'll figure it out. That's pretty magic. Not everyone can do that.
It's amazing. It's amazing.
Question about the dishes, because a lot of the photos are, and this is when I'm like, the audio, it's like, we can't show these pictures because they're so vibrant. There's so much there. But the dishes that you're showing, I mean, some are plated. Are you in some places cooking those, or are you at restaurants, or how are you, doing how many islands in 10 days and able to show up and find the recipes you needed cooked to represent in your book? How'd you make that happen?
I mean, I was the fixer. So for like one particular stretch in Sardinia, I hired a chef friend to cook. He's got this like incredible family property that was a restaurant, but it's not a restaurant anymore. So it's just where the family goes and hangs. And so he cooked like 7 recipes, and we didn't use any special props. It was just like the stuff that he had there that felt really natural and really fun. But for the other elements, I would ring up a bakery and say, like, can we shoot your sfincione? Sure. We would go 20 seconds later, Ed was done. Or at La Marina in Ponza, I know what their menu is in June. And I knew that we were going to be able to shoot a bunch of things there, including the owner, Gennaro, holding a beautiful scorpion fish. I knew that there was going to be some fish action shots to be had, and that the cooks were going to be in the kitchen barefoot, and they were going to be flipping spaghetti alle vongole, and those images were going to be easy to do.
Cool. That's a great question, Molly, that you asked, because it is true. I mean, what if you plan those 10 days and you're winging it and you're not getting what you need? That would be super stressful. But Katie, with your background doing tours, exploring, writing for travel guides, you know that like if you just do the research ahead of time, set it up so that you can hit the ground running and you're going to see the people you need to see, the time of year, the images that you have on your shot list. I mean, but were you relieved when the photo shoot was over and you got what you needed? Because I would be super stressed for those 10 days.
I was so tired I couldn't even have any feelings.
Yeah, believe it. Believe it.
Did you already say when the photo shoot was?
It was in June of 2022. November 1st, the final files went to the printer, and we started printing November 14th. It took 30 days of printing and then binding, and then the shipment went out from Italy in the end of January.
Wow. Did you have a lot of printers to choose from? I mean, how did you select the printer?
I wanted to be able to be there, and I really do want to explore Chinese printing options and other global printing options, but I wanted to be able to be there. I wanted to be able to have total access to the floor and photograph and do video. And so I went with the very first printer that I sought a quote from, Ita System. Although they don't do books, they do a lot of like prosciutto company pamphlets and boxes for food. A lot of the people who run their huge offset printers have worked in book publishing for years and were excited about the prospect of doing this. And like, we got a guy that does binding. We got a guy that does foil in Bergamo. We'll send the books back and forth. And I trusted them to do it. It didn't feel risky to me because I'd seen how the factory runs, how efficient things were. Yeah, I think just because I didn't know anything about that part, I was like, I'm just going to go with this. Which is maybe not the best business decision, but it worked out. It worked out.
Presses start rolling. When do you see books?
I saw the first book like January 15th or something. Yeah, because like people of the north of Italy always put down people in the south. Be like, oh my God, they're so lazy, they never work. That's not true. That's a stereotype. People in the north take such aggressive holidays. It's actually shocking. And so the book would have been finished a lot earlier, but the binder went on vacation from like December 23rd to January 8th. So
that's amazing.
There was a big pause in the production, which I was pretty pissed about. But in the end, it ended up being very tight, like shipping the books to New York at the end of January, got them there at the end of February, and the book came out March 7th. So I would not repeat that timeline. I would definitely want to have 2 or 3 months in which the books are in the warehouse, even if I'm paying for them to take up space, just for that extra ability for wholesale distribution to start and be able to send books out to press.
That's a really good point, right? That's just to give yourself a little bit more lead time in case, say, that something did happen logistically, there's a port strike. I don't know, things happen. And then all of a sudden your books are sort of in like, just like they're there. I can see them. They're off the coast of Jersey, but they're not here. So I can see that fortunately the stars aligned, the books got here, the books are selling well. And I think that's one thing that's really interesting about figuring all that out is when we've talked about self-publishing, it seems that a lot of times people are they have 99% there. And then when the talk goes to sales and distribution, that's when the other shoe drops and they say, okay, this is not for me. But for you now, you kind of feel invincible. You figured it all out. So I kind of wanted to know, like, what's next? I mean, because one of the things Molly and I have talked about with publishing is that it's changing so fast now. There's, at least with fiction and maybe some nonfiction, people have left big publishing houses and they've started imprints that are really personality driven, like Zando Publishing or Zibby Books, where a personality is behind the books that they're choosing to publish. So when it comes down to promotion, it's sort of like this person says, you should read this book. And that's very different, I think, from the old way of doing things. I mean, is that kind of how you see things going? I mean, would Parla Publishing become sort of a book influencer / publisher / brand in that sense?
Where it's going to evolve, I'm not sure. But at the moment, I'm working with the Angelini Osteria. I wrote the book. I project managed it, hired all the editors and photographers and designer. I'll manage the printing. I'll help them with their e-commerce and stocking Amazon and basically shepherd them through the whole process. But I know that not everybody's vision of a book and not everybody's vision of success aligns with a traditional one. Some brands want to have a book in order to be able to give it to their clients or customers. And so I'm working, hopefully we'll be working with a couple of brands to develop products like that. There are so many people with a lot of stories to tell that don't have the capital to fund a publishing project or hire me to consult on it. And so rather than doing the sort of consulting bit, the sort of goal and something that I'm developing currently is how I can be a true publisher in the sense that I'm covering the production costs, I'm managing all of the freelancers who are creating the book. And then there's some sort of profit share on the other end where I get my expenses reimbursed, but then also the author benefits. But I'm in the very early stages of developing those structures, but I'm going to be doing a full launch of Parla Publishing Services this fall.
And then also, you're a fellow podcaster.
See,
tell us a little bit about that.
Gola, you can listen to it wherever you get your pods. The podcast is about Italian food and culture and beverage. It is co-hosted with Dr. Danielle Caligari of Dartmouth. We talk about usually single subjects. We'll do an episode on mineral water in Italy, which is like a whole thing. We're doing a few episodes later today. We'll be recording one about climate change and its impact on Italian food and agriculture. We'll do highlights on cities like Naples. It's not a super like formal or structured situation. We're not disorganized. We're like organized people in life. But I would say, you guys have plotted out what we're going to talk about. You've got thoughtful questions, and we can't have guests because we just kind of just like talk to each other.
We started that way.
And so I've lived in Italy for 20 years. Danielle has been studying and living in and out of Italy for nearly as long. And so we like to share our perspective, which is quite a critical one, in fact, about the food and beverage culture of Italy.
Yeah, it's a great listen, and very jealous you have a studio.
Well, thank you to our patrons who we call Golosi, who helped fund the studio recordings.
Very cool.
That's really cool. I know we're wrapping up, but one thing that's really interesting, I think, to point out is that when your book came out in March, you did a massive tour. You're Rome-based, but you write for mainly a U.S. audience, although I'm sure your books sell all over the world. But when we contact you again in August, you're back in the U.S. doing another tour and doing cities that wouldn't necessarily show up on everybody's list of, it's not New York and LA and San Francisco, but you're doing Lancaster, Pennsylvania and Dearborn, Michigan, and just doing cities and having really robust events. So I just want to say for listeners, thinking about we talk a lot about promotion, and case in point that it's not just those first few weeks after the book launches, and it's also not just, New York and LA. Just shout out to that.
Yeah. I mean, love New York and LA and obsessed with Kitchen Arts and Letters and now serving and then all these great cookbook driven spaces. But I do my worst sales in the big cities. We did 200 in Lancaster, Pennsylvania, and 110 in Detroit. So think about it, guys.
Yeah, right.
Secondary and tertiary cities are where it's at.
Absolutely.
Yep. It's
and
really
then
cool.
Anything else you'd like to add if somebody wanted to go it alone or start their own publishing business, or certain things that maybe you wish you had known before you took the plunge?
I think the number one thing is use whatever data you can to support your marketing or promotion, but then also to help predict what your sales could be, and do nerd out on an Excel spreadsheet. Play around with different cover prices. Just talk to as many third-party logistics companies as you can. Figure out where printing could be the most appropriate for you. But really do think about the math, because the numbers can work. You can finesse them, but it doesn't necessarily work for everybody. So use numbers and use data to your advantage.
Great advice.
Those third-party companies you're working with, what's the best way to find them?
So I work with the Vanity Project, tvp.nyc. But I literally just went on the internet and searched for third-party logistics companies, read a lot of reviews, and talked to friends who have merch and stuff for their businesses, talked to people in the industry, and just really cast a wide net, and then put up a spreadsheet with all the different costs and made the decision based on that.
Very smart.
It's important.
And this is it. We talk about publishing, creating your own book. It's a business. You're like a small business owner if you're publishing your own book, whether it's with a traditional path or going it alone. So that's really, really smart. And at the end, you have this beautiful book that I said at the beginning. I really thought this was another Clarkson Potter book until I looked carefully at the watermark. So Katie Parla, thanks so much for joining Everything Cookbooks today. Molly and I think our brains are a little blown from all the stuff we've learned. Molly, you gonna publish your own book next?
We'll talk about that. But Katie, we'll put everything where people can find you and your food tours and everything that you're doing in the show notes. But really, just thanks so much for spending time and for just your generosity of information.
Well, Molly and Kate, I really appreciate it. This was really fun. Thank you.
Ciao. Thank you for listening to Everything Cookbooks. For more episodes and ways to contact us, go to our website, everythingcookbooks.com. You'll find more episodes on Apple Podcasts or wherever you get your audio. And if you like what you hear, please leave us a review. It really does help more people find the show. Any book we mention on the show can be found on our affiliate page at bookshop.org. Thanks, as always, to our editor, Abby Cirquatella. And until next time, keep on writing, reading, and cooking.